Hey, everybody. John Sviokla here with the Growth Innovator Series, and I'm delighted to have an old and dear friend of mine by the name of Kevin Hartley. Welcome, Kevin.
Woohoo!
Today we're going to talk about 5 ways beauty can grow your business, and Kevin and I really think that, and we at Manifold, we have a really good design capability. We at Manifold believe that beauty, customer experience, product design, service design, environment design is an area that is hugely valuable to customers and is one that's probably the least competed. That is and it's always great to compete where everybody else is not paying attention. And we have some ideas about why that's hard, some examples and so forth. And we're going to explore the emerging science of neuroaesthetics, which basically says your brain likes more beautiful things. And from an evolutionary standpoint, it probably makes sense that we choose more beautiful things. And at the end of the day, it makes customers delighted to and more inclined to buy your products and services. And it's fun to do. It's inspiring and so forth. We'll get into that. But first, let me give you a quick background in terms of what we're about today, what our agenda is. And for those of you new to us, a little bit about Manifold. So let me first give you a little bit of background on Kevin. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do, in the chat, if you have any questions or so forth, please, we're monitoring that, and we'll try to answer any questions you have if you have them as they come up. So Kevin is a person that's hard to categorize, and the reason he's hard to categorize is he's one part genius, creative artist, one part entrepreneur and business person, and one part really consultant, and now also building up his speaking business. Because he's a very inspirational speaker around the idea of creativity and beauty. And so I first met Kevin when he was doing the very first green energy brand called Green Mountain Power. And among Kevin's, and this was back in the late 90s and mid 90s. And back then, it's all a big deal right now in terms of eco-friendly. But Kevin's been concerned about ESG, environment, social, and growth. And inclusion, really for the past 30 years. And among his many distinctions, actually was the first person, and I think the only person ever to have James Taylor do a corporate gig because James believed in Green Mountain Power so much. Anyway, we got to know each other there. I have kept in touch over the years as he had his own business and then grew the Keurig part of the business, the Keurig business significantly before it got bought by JAB, a German private equity company. And we're going to talk a little bit about his journey there, and is now in the middle of launching a fantastic new Keurig brand called Cambio, which is eco-friendly and fantastic tasting and also socially relevant and innovative in the Keurig aisle in a way that nothing else is. So we'll get into that. But he's also just a ton of fun, a mediocre golfer, and a great drinking buddy. So there we are. So Kevin, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Usually we also talk about why we care and what the ongoing notion is here about there's a fundamental transformation in the economy, what we call the law of computability. Things are getting more and more computable. And in that, one of the things that we need to worry about is what is the experience that somebody has as stuff gets more digitized, omni-channel, and so forth. And so we will get into that. But first, let's just get at a really straightforward example here. So 1997, GM had a car called the EV1. And then here's the 2021 Tesla Model S Plaid, which I believe beats or is in competition with the Ferrari Testarossa, which costs about 2.5 to 4 times as much as this particular in terms of performance. So just think about those two things. And Kevin, let's get into why do we think, I mean, you and I have talked a lot about Musk and how he thinks about beauty as a central part of what he's doing. Why don't we start off with just why you think, beauty is such a big deal in terms of competitive advantage?
Yeah, so interesting. I love how you characterize that, John, as probably the least understood and least used competitive dimension. So normally we're taught, as you articulate well, scale, R&D, distribution power. Those are the traditional dimensions of competition.
Yes.
Interestingly, using the more visually appealing thing is kind of like this huge secret weapon that's hiding in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think like what you just showed, Tesla versus GM. So my dad worked at Delco on the first GM car project in the 60s.
Uh-huh.
And when they rolled out the
When you say the GM car project, you mean the GM electric car project?
electric car project, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So,
Uh-huh.
and when they rolled out the prototype, if you had sent it into let's make it as ugly as possible school, you still would have lost. It looked like an egg. It had three wheelers, only weird three wheels, only interesting looking characters were driving it. And that's how the big automotive thought about electrification of transportation.
Yes.
The second Elon said, no, 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 if the second it was drop dead gorgeous, the market cap was higher than any of his competitive peers. The
Yes.
reason for that is because there was latent demand for that product, obviously, but humans are hardwired in their primitive brain and they can't help themselves to pick the more appealing object. And the second he removed that barrier, it exploded into, I don't even know what the market cap is now, John, but something crazy.
Yeah, it was over a trillion recently, I think. And yeah,
Lord help me.
Lord help me. Yeah, and it's interesting too. If you remember back in the history of Tesla, when he came in before, right, and then when he came in as CEO, he got the Lotus Europa body, and then he put in his battery and power
Yes,
management technology. So I remember our mutual friend Per Monk bought one for
he did.
120. Yeah, and then he sold it to his brother for a profit, who was living in Norway. Anyway, because that's another whole story. The but as you remember, it was just spectacular. No one had ever seen an electric car that didn't look like something that came out of a hospital or a golf course. You know what I mean? Um, and really took the world by storm. Uh, and then I think has really thought from first principles up in the context of what beauty means and how that can also lead to function. In a certain way, Elon is very much in the Bauhaus school, which you remember was form follows function, right? Gropius and the crew basically blasting past the architects of the past and created beautiful artifacts like the John Hancock Center in Chicago, or the Sears building, which is now the Willis Tower. But that whole form follows function thing. I think Elon does that, and really comes from those first principles of what engineering can he do to make it work. Let's so there we have the notion of it's a totally different animal, and he starts the wave of beauty and so forth. This, I think, in terms of kitchenware, on the left here we have traditional stuff. On the right, OXO. So when we speak about this opportunity to reinvent something or hiding in plain sight, I mean, what could be more commodity than what's in the kitchen? Even the stuff on the left here is more differentiated, right? It's got ceramic handles and so forth, but cheap, made in China, shipped over, nobody can compete. OXO comes into the market and says, wait a second, these everyday things could actually be more beautiful and more functional. I mean, how do you think about this, Kevin?
Um, yeah, so great jumping off point. It wouldn't, to us as business people, it wouldn't matter if it didn't so deeply affect, as my mother would say, preference.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we mean by that? If you, this is probably under the construct of smart people overcomplicate things, but as business people, we're actually trying to sell stuff. 100% of our customers are people, 100%. And 100% of the time, they will always buy what they prefer. The reason they prefer the better looking item is because pleasure is actually a chemical process. It's hardwired in the human brain. So it
Mm-hmm.
short circuits a lot of our rational cognitive thinking. So the reason OXO, the reason Tesla,
Oh well. Ugly. Hi, Kevin.
Can you hear me still?
I can.
It just said our video stream has been disconnected.
Very strange. No, I think we're good. Oh, now you stopped. Let me find out. Let's
Okay.
see. Presenters. Okay. Yes, I think it's on your end, Kevin. I think I'm still good.
Okay. Is it still
You're
bad?
back. Nope, you're good now. Keep going. You're starting to say the chemicals in terms of the reason OXO or Tesla. Oh, you're coming in and out. Bad connection. Try turning off your video, Kevin. See if that works. Let me see. Okay. Let's get. Here we are. Hey, Kevs. Kev, why don't you try turning off your video for now?
Okay. Let me see how to do that here.
It's up in the top.
I just
See.
turned it off.
Great. Okay, let's do that. Um, can you hear us? Okay.
Yes. Perfect.
Wonderful. Okay.
So,
So yes,
so,
you started to say so for OXO and for Tesla. You started to say it's about the brain and chemistry.
yeah. So the reason that works is because the more aesthetically appealing item increases preference for the stuff you're trying to sell, and a human
Mhm.
can't help it because when a human sees the more aesthetically appealing object, it fires off the same reward centers in the brain as it does looking at art or with addiction. And so that's
Mhm.
actually a chemical change. Emotions are chemical, and humans are motivated to feel better. And that's why the more visually appealing stuff always wins.
You know, it's
Apex.
interesting. Uh-huh. Yeah, I think the thing that's just for the OXO thing for a minute. I mean, I think about the value that's created here. So, and I know you have experience when we talk about the Keurig stuff. The plastic stuff over here on the right, we're looking at the OXO kitchen utensils, is really about going, from cheap plastic stuff or cheap wooden stuff. And then the price points are 2 or 3x what some of the competition is. So you think about the margin increase because it can't cost that much more to do an OXO plastic egg flipper than a traditional plastic egg flipper or wooden egg flipper. And the price is significantly more based on that beauty. So the margin discovered is unbelievable.
100%, John. I think that's right on.
Kevin, could you dive a little bit into some of the work you did at Keurig? And for those of you in the audience, Kevin uh, worked at Keurig and just completely reinvented the Keurig coffee maker, and the one that we know so well. It's not a very beautiful thing. It's very functional, and sits on your counter, usually black and pretty big, and takes the pods and so forth. But Kevin, why don't you speak to that, because I think you did a pretty fundamental redesign of that device, and the success it's had in the marketplace, and how costly that was or wasn't to make that happen.
Yeah, so interesting. We were talking about this a moment ago, but this year the US will consume 18 billion K cups, if people can believe that. And there's 90 million houses with a coffee maker in the US. 33.5 million consider Keurig their primary coffee brewing system, and it's growing at about 9 to 11% CAGR as we speak. And the insight, John, that you're talking about, what
Kevin, can I
radically,
just pause you? Can I pause you
yeah.
for a second? So that's 90 million brewers out of how many households? Because we have
So
330.
there's 115 million US households ish.
Right. So
90
it's
million have some sort of coffee maker.
yes.
And of those, 33.5 million consider
Okay.
Keurig to be their primary coffee making system in home.
Wow. And that's the dominant provider by far, isn't it?
Well, still the old Mr. Coffee is the other basically 60 million households. And then
Ah,
the research is pretty clear that looks like at current pricing, Keurig will top out at about 55 million US households. So there's sort of a 50% ceiling still, growth
Okay.
ceiling.
And Kevin, let's try your video again, see if it works, just for fun.
See if it works.
All right. Very good. Okay. So yes, you started to say, so that's the opportunity.
So the a lot of an interesting thing about competing with design or making your products more aesthetically appealing. Some organizations value that and some don't, but it's always adjudicated. It just depends on who's adjudicating it. We Green Mountain bought Keurig in '06, and Keurig was a engineering based company, and all the designs were adjudicated by the engineering team.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't a world-class product designer within a million miles of those designs. And what
Yes.
was interesting, and this shows that sometimes it's better just to be lucky than smart, but when we were working on the brewer designs for our premium brewer line, which would mean people who had kitchens that had their Sub-Zeros and Dakars and those kind of appliances, and they kept saying in the research, guys, will you make us a drop dead gorgeous looking brewer so I'm proud to have it on my countertop? And from that insight, we designed those brewers, and it turned out that our traditional customers in the research, when they saw the drop dead gorgeous brewers versus the current brewers, the purchase intent up went 212%, if I remember it correctly. So the way we sold it internally was, what if we democratize design on behalf of our customers? What if we actually use best in class industrial designers who know what they're doing and stay at the same price points? Because ugly plastic and cheap plastic costs about the same. So why not have a drop dead gorgeous line? Year on year, they're all now in the market. Year on year, they grew. Last year, they grew.
You said ugly plastic and cheap plastic are the same. I think you mean to say ugly plastic and beautiful plastic cost about the same.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's hard to get good help in these joints. An ugly plastic and beautiful plastic usually cost about the same. And shipping them from China is identical cost. Distributing them is an identical cost, et cetera. So the beauty premium or the aesthetically appealing premiums really was not that high. And we were able to keep brewers at the different price points. And you can see them in any Target or Bed Bath or online now. And that resulted in a 28% year-on-year sales increase for the brewers, which means that many less people are attriting from the system and that many more households are growing, which we make our money with K-Cups. So that's a good thing. Razor blade.
Yes. That's amazing. So 28%. And how much was it growing before, Kevin, with the old engineering-based design?
4, 5, or 6%.
So you let's say quadrupled the growth rate in a maturing market by using beauty.
Yeah, 100%. And then I think it would be disingenuous to say that growth rate would continue ad infinitum, but it was a step function change at least.
Great, unbelievable. So
yeah, kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to this issue here, OXO was a new company. Keurig was an existing company. And what are some of the challenges? Kevin, I hate people who simply judge everybody and say, oh, they're just idiots, or, other companies or big companies can't do this or whatever. I mean, what I love about your career, Kevin, is you've taken that on, you've gone into the belly of the beast, you're like Jonah in the whale, and you figure out, how to live in there, right? And not die. So what are some of the challenges, and how did you deal with some of those in terms of when you're inside, not an entrepreneurial company and a design-oriented company, but an engineering and a traditional company? How do you bring beauty to the fore?
Yeah, so fantastic question. In my 30-year observation, the difficulty of that is going to depend on the predisposition of the most powerful people in the organization. Mm-hmm. And you can see where it's so in some organizations it's valued, some organizations it's not valued, and some they're somewhere in between. But So under the place where it's not valued at all, the path to having it incorporated is because we're still all capitalists. And so the path to getting them to adopt that as a competitive dimension is for them to embrace the notion that it will increase preference and increase profitability. And whenever you're trying to completely change the mental model of a senior team, you can't just say a phrase like, let's make all the products more beautiful. It totally makes sense. That is a non-starter. You have
Yes.
to give every customer something they can say yes to. And if you're trying to change the mental model of the existing senior team, you have to say something like, why don't we, with our customers, in a small research project with some models, test the purchase, whether there's purchase intent increase and or price elasticity accessible with a drop dead gorgeous design. And we can do that for literally next to nothing. And normally people will go, oh, yeah, I could picture saying yes to that. I'm not going to say, quote, yes to, let's change our whole line just because some Yahoo named Kevin wants to do it. And then if in fact that does show either price elasticity availability, like you were just talking about, and or purchase intent increase, which it almost universally will because of the hardwiredness of the human brain, then you go to the next concentric circle and say, okay, why don't we tackle a small piece of our line, maybe not hire the most expensive industrial designer in the world, but hire one that really knows what he or she's doing, and let's then test market with that, do a beta with that program, and just you keep marching along. You have to give a customer, like if you say that a better design is a quote product, you need to sell it to your senior team. You can't bridge the chasm too quickly. You have to have incremental steps they can say yes to, is the answer.
So it's so interesting. So if I hear you right, Kevin, you're saying, hey, actually thinking about beauty is a product in itself that you have to sell to a traditional management team. And then there's the beautiful product that you have to design. So it's really the difference between, and I know I'm grossly oversimplifying, but the difference between being an entrepreneurial startup based on, hey, our products need to be beautiful like an apple, and working inside Keurig to try to make beautiful products, or working inside any of the folks who are, listening to our podcast here, is to really think, hey, you've got a two-stage innovation and sales process here. You have to be able to tie the idea of beauty and design and so forth and sell that inside. And then, of course, you have to build and sell the beautiful product outside. Is that fair?
Yes, and you have to tie, when you're selling it inside, it has to impact at the NPV, the financial value of the organization. And if you don't tie it to that, it will be a non-starter. And if you try to do too big an ask early, it will be a non-starter.
So really, you have to build your way there in terms of it. It's really a kind of as you say, moving the mental model of the management team.
And then, like you said, the opposite perspective is a guy like everyone talks about Apple, but after the early ugly stuff, nothing could get out of that place that wasn't drop dead gorgeous. And if he had to buy every CNC freaking machine in the world to do it, that's what he did. That's the opposite end of the spectrum. But it's fair to say, if every Apple product looked like a normal ugly laptop, it'd be a tiny little company today.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and I would say the artifact, yes, the software, yes, and even the experience, yes. I think that they're compared to when I bought my first Mac, the unboxing experience has gone down, not up, in terms of quality. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
that's right.
The edges. But yeah, no, it's fascinating. Another thing, Kevin, that and I've told you this in the past, but the other thing is that more than any other creative person I've dealt with, you speak the language of the commercial marketer, purchase intent, household penetration, attachment rates, and really tie it back to the metrics of the business in a way that usually most designers and or creative leads, I think, are, when they do that, it's very ham-handed compared to the way you do it in a very fluid way, the same way I would think, any, sophisticated Madison Avenue advertising executive would do.
Yeah, that's funny that you observe that. I see a lot of my role as a translation function
Mm-hmm.
between world-class design that I know is going to help us make a lot of money because it
Yeah.
impacts preference consumers, translating that into business language that my contemporaries can embrace. So
Yes.
it's a really key skill set. This is a fun story, John, to build on your observation. So after the Madison Avenue execs or innovation teams like IDEO, after they
Yep.
leave the boardroom of Fortune 500 America, here are the two
Yes.
conversations. So both people are rich and successful. The agency leaves in a big black limo and they are talking to themselves. Those corporate suits wouldn't know a good idea if it bit him in the ear. I cannot believe how they wouldn't embrace any of our good thinking. Boom, off they go. In the boardrooms, they're going, those creative people, did you see how high up off the ground their pants were hemmed and their big pointy shoes? They wouldn't know what's realistic in our business to save 3 people's lives. Boom, nothing great happens. As a result of that, what happens in real organizations is everyone who's pitching something like an ad campaign or a new product design, they're in their own career optimization business.
Right.
And standing out is not highly correlated with success in most large organizations. So the breakthrough ideas are normally never shown to their boss or their boss's boss because it's risky. And
Yes.
that's why average is so everywhere. And I love how you say it, John, that average is actually a certainty tax. I think that's
Yes.
a brilliant line, but
Yeah.
you can see how it gets there when people care about their careers.
Absolutely. Yeah. They get all the downside, none of the upside, and they have to do 2 sales processes.
Yeah,
It's just
can you imagine when Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield couldn't buy their uh, bagel making machine because it was too expensive, so they bought a hand crank mixer in my little town of Burlington, Vermont, and they just loaded it up with candy and cookie dough and all that crap. Can you imagine trying to get that approved in an ice cream company? You're gonna what? You're gonna load it up with all this expensive crap? What are you, drunk? I mean, get out of here, right? And
right.
fast forward, X number of years later, and Unilever writes them a $400 million check.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at something like Dollar Shave Club, and that guy, he's got a guy in a bear suit, and they're talking about going to the bathroom, and idiot, whatever. Yeah, it's try getting that through, Unilever's, ad people. Good luck.
No,
And
impossible.
then Unilever buys them for $1 billion on $164 million in revenue. I think that's
So back to your hey John, just to wrap back to your really interesting probing question in real organizations.
yes,
So to have an organization have the courage to do great things when they're not already predisposed, like the target executives or Steve Jobs or Elon,
yes,
that's a heavy lift.
yeah,
That's a heavy lift. And you have to go through this modular process and you continually have to tie it back to business financial performance, which is easy to do because it's the least understood competitive dimension, and your competitors will never do it because of the reasons we just said.
yeah. I think one of the things that's interesting, though, Kevin, is I've observed your career is that, and I think that designers, unfortunately, like addicts. I mean, I think a lot of the reason a lot of addicts are a lot of artists are addicts is that it's been said that if you basically have a thin skin and you're empathetic and you really are sensitive to different inputs on a emotional and a personal on a person to person basis, a lot of addictive behavior, people who are addicted often have that attribute. But I
Yes.
think great designers have that
100%.
attribute, and I think it's a rare combination of someone who has a thin enough skin to come up with some great products and services, and a thick enough skin to get through the gauntlet after gauntlet of getting an existing organization to move. You think that's a fair? I know
Yeah,
you.
because
Mhm.
100%, 150 million% correct. In fact, in most large organizations, every person with that sensitive, empathetic side has been forced out a long time ago because they can't compete. And in fact, it's interesting. If you think of an executive's career as having to win his one downs competing with his peers one downs, that's actually where the whole competitive game is played in the Fortune
It's
500.
explain a little
So
bit
in other
for
words,
folks when you say the one down.
yeah.
What you, yeah.
In other words, if there's two talented executives duking it out in the zero sum game of trying to be CEO, and they're both sort of equally talented, the game's going to be played by their direct reports in meetings with their competitors' direct reports. I mean, internal competitors' direct reports when neither of them are there.
Right.
And then what'll happen if you're a person who hires big-hearted, empathetic people, they're going to get demolished in those meetings. And so they have short career tenures because you can't keep your job doing that. So everybody, that's the reason, fundamental reason why people with that predisposition are not in large organizations. Mm-hmm. However, the positive side is when a senior team embraces this idea, mm-hmm. there's plenty of outside resources that you can use to do amazing things. You just have to adjudicate it. You don't have to create it. And there's plenty of people, as you know, can hire that can make your product such that it taps into people's chemical seeking, pleasure seeking mechanism. Yes. And the beauty of it is, as we've said before, John, if you do it, your competitors are not likely to follow.
Yes.
Yeah. For the reasons that it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well,
it's a super powerful.
It is. I mean, and you know, it's fascinating because you and I have talked about this too in the past. You know, a lot of times you have people judging new products and services, judging new experiences who have never launched a new one in their lives. I mean, it'd be like me judging fine wines. I mean, you do not want to buy wine based on the palate.
Same.
You know, I mean, maybe I can tell the difference between a Manischewitz and a dessert wine, or maybe not. You know, and so you have these people judging this stuff, and they have no earthly idea. I mean, in their experience, what a truly breakthrough product or service might be.
Yeah, and just sort of I think that's great observation. And one of the layers of the onion, if you peel back on what you just articulated, is that, like, you fill in the blank any company, but let's say Keurig's doing 18 billion K-cups.
Right. Yeah.
To change packaging that's 50% more expensive on 18 billion things, you have to be pretty sure that, because, right?
Yeah.
So you're battling hundreds of cents. So and this comes back to the reason why large organizations are so acquisitive and why innovation inside is so hard. But the reason they're acquisitive is they let the entrepreneurs duke it out around some new packaging format. Like, Method soaps, the beautiful soap bottles that had the exclusive at Target and then are now a monster brand.
Yes.
To take that kind of packaging increase inside a large organization and to be that design forward, I mean, God bless you, whoever tried. It just, there could be 50 of yous and it's not going to happen. But they're happy to acquire it. So, but that's after everything looks smart in hindsight.
Yes.
And all brilliant packaging ideas, if you're not Walt Disney or you're not Steve Lasseter of Pixar or one of these really unique people,
yes,
then it goes through a more circuitous route.
Well, even Walt, as our mutual friend Alan Kayas told us, even Walt Disney, when he wanted to do the theme park, he had to go in Anaheim. He had to go buy the land himself and then sell it back to the corporation. Disney World, he had to do the same thing. And first he was going to do it in Louisiana, and then people got wind of it and they started bidding up prices. And then he moved it over to Florida. And but I mean, even Walt Disney, I mean, had to. And Roy,
like he's one of those stories. Like, God bless the pure geniuses, but for the rest of us, I think it's really fascinating, the conversation we were just having, which is it's still true that it impacts a consumer's preference.
Yes.
Dramatically. Ergo, it makes sense. So how do we think about that in real organizations that and that aren't already hardwired with that as they're going forward, which is most of us, frankly, right?
Yeah.
Most.
Could you just run through how you look at Kmart versus Target and like to this notion of beauty and the environment?
Yeah. So on the when you're thinking of reinventing yourself, even when you know you need to, a lot of times the capital lift you face isn't really doable. So let's say you're too late and your stores are in all the wrong strip malls and they're all the wrong physical space. That's tough. That's tough. And I don't want to gloss that over.
Right. Sure.
That said, um, that said, what's happening to today's consumer is the baseline of what they think is acceptable from an aesthetically appealing thing is on a constant march.
Right.
And really I think the Target example is fascinating because taking what in essence were the same products, and oh, by the way, everyone says about how they had all these proprietary in-house designs and everything. That's not true early on. That was not true. That didn't get traction for a long time. So even though that idea existed, what is true is that human beings, when they see one thing versus another, will go to where they prefer, as we said before, 100% of the time.
Yes.
And they preferred wider aisles, better lighting. The grocery carts all match the logo. These things that humans have a hard time articulating. But it's interesting, John, if you think about why does that win? What is going on in the human brain? And why is it a shared thing? It's an interesting question. There's several reasons, but a huge one is that when apes were turning into humans, and I'm going to dangerously oversimplify, but when humans were becoming humans, they had a random preference, according to Darwin, for all kinds of different things: ugly landscapes, good-looking landscapes, ugly mates, good-looking mates. What happened was the group that randomly liked lush landscapes and good-looking mates survived. That's how it became a herd preference, and why things like facial symmetry exist across cultures. So there's certain this primitive brain exists. That's why it's so powerful. And as we said again, humans are looking to increase pleasure and decrease pain in every single decision they make. And pleasure is actually a chemical called dopamine triggered in the brain that's ticked off by beauty. So what was happening with Target is they, whether presciently or accidentally, just because somebody cared, I don't know the story, but all those signals triggered the chemical pleasure delivery in humans' brains, and they can't help themselves. They start going there. And then you start that beautiful positive spiral of oh my God, this is actually working well. What if we did a designer line of dresses that our head, designer lady was telling us to do, or whatever? And the organization starts to get more and more courage and drive down that direction.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And you're saying, look, on average, things are getting more like that, like the new McDonald's.
The bars keeps getting raised.
Yeah. Competition, man. I hate it. Okay.
The wheel of retail. That's exactly right.
The wheel of retail. I just want to go through some other ones that, in terms of not beauty products, but beautiful products, beauty products too, I guess. You look at, the reinvention here of the, thermostat, and then, even Sony TV, right? 1990 Sony TV, you look at, how beautiful it is here. And then I wanted to bring us to, your journey at Cambio, and what you've been up to. We talked a lot about Keurig and so forth, where you were before, but we've got about, 15, 20 minutes left. I would love for you to just talk about how you've used these principles to launch this exciting new brand. And, to the extent you can, because I know you have certain constraints with competition and investors and so forth, but to the extent you can, tell us about what's going on with Cambio.
Yeah. Okay, that's fun. In consumer packaged goods, CPG, between 96 and 97% of new offerings fail. Now, remember, those are typically launched by Unilever and Procter and, the biggest research budgets and product designers and stuff in the world. The recipe for success is one of the key elements of in a recipe for success is there has to be a big unmet need. So if the marketer has to create a need, that's a lot heavier lift than there is an unmet need. Like, it's called latent demand. Like, there was a demand for really good looking, super fast electric cars with zero tailpipe emissions. He didn't have to invent that. It was there. He just drove right through that beautiful door. In K-Cups, interestingly, the only aisle in US center store grocery where there is not a mission and purpose driven, totally cool brand is in the K-Cup set.
So if I go to
That's the only one.
If I go to catch up, mission. I say if I go to catch up, there's one. If I go to
ice cream,
there's one. Ice cream. Okay, got it. So K-Cup is the only one that doesn't have a Ben and Jerry's.
That's correct.
Fascinating.
Correct. To oversimplify. And it turns out with the data, you guys, that's not a trivial segment. It's 21% of existing K-Cup buyers wish that product existed. And very importantly, from a business size, without sacrificing taste or price.
Right.
So it's disingenuous to say you're going to have big businesses that are mission driven where they sacrifice product performance. That's just a disingenuous claim. I can show you data where people say it's true. It's just not true. So
I'm sorry. When you say, so customers will say they would do it, but their behavior is that they don't.
In a niche way, sure, they'll do it, but not big
broadly.
Brands creating big value. So Cambio is the only triple bottom line, which you probably know what we mean by that. Everyone on the audience, that's the phrase that I didn't make up. It was coined in 1996. When I first saw it, I've been obsessed with it ever since. And it means having a bottom line for not only profit, but for people and the planet as well. And so we've designed Cambio to be that brand, and it's three major pillars. And one of my early bosses in food and beverage, you guys said, Kevin, so I kind of like your shtick, but remember, if you lose on taste, your shtick doesn't make a hill of beans a difference. So
right,
in Cambio,
right.
And my children say, Dad, are you sure anyone actually likes your shtick? But be that as it may. So the three pillars of Cambio, really kind of fun. The first is start on taste. It's the best coffee you can source in the world. My roast master is 5th generation from the Peets family, and roasting is a real art and a science together. And we have patented ridges on the cup that hold the filter away from it, so it extracts coffee deliciousness much better than an old straight-sided cup. That's pillar one. Pillar two is it has to be easy to recycle, because at 18 billion, the math is more than 40 million a day going to landfill. 40 million a day, 365 going to landfill. So with our easy peel tab lid and recyclable materials that you can just throw in the blue bin, and they can go on to have another life, either a car part or a toothbrush handle or whatever, where polypropylene is used, which is the world's most upcyclable plastic. And then pillar three is coffee farming families struggle. So every coffee brand, including all the ones I used to run, talk about the beauty of the coffee farmers. But coffee is the world's largest commodity, and no big brand will give 1/100 of a cent to anybody. They don't have to.
Isn't oil bigger?
It's one of the world. Did I say the? It's one of
Yeah.
the world's commodities. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to misspeak. It's interesting, you guys, when an American hears coffee farm, what they think of is a John Deere tractor and amber fields of waving grain.
Yeah.
A coffee farm, a real coffee farm, is somewhere between usually 3,500 feet to 10,000 feet, somewhere between in elevation, somewhere between the Tropic of Capricorn and Tropic of Cancer, around the equator. An American would call the house a shack or a shanty, and a farm is usually 2 to 4 acres that they can harvest the beautiful coffee cherry. The coffee bean is actually the seed of the coffee cherry, and they can harvest that only 1.5 times per year. And it's a nice way to say they have food scarcity problems, but really what we mean is they starve about 6 months a year. And in Colombia, a coffee farmer can't send their boys to school past the 10th grade, or the drug lords will kidnap them. So it's real deal. So we don't give 1, but 20% of profits back to 10,000 struggling coffee farming families. And if we hit our little objective, 60,000 less people in the world would starve. So, and then back to, so design and making your product more appealing also has an emotional component, John.
Yes.
If you can have, the other thing that's true with humans is a lot of us prefer to work for organizations or buy from organizations that have a mission bigger than themselves and bigger than profit. And again, humans can't help themselves. Now most of us won't make huge sacrifices, but if that's the case, you can really impact preference.
Mm-hmm.
And then the packaging, if you show the packaging again, John. So the K-cup aisle, which is normally 24 feet. And when I first tried to sell the first grocery store in 2006 with my friends, we got laughed out of every single one of them, that no one would ever buy a K-cup for 50 or 60 cents when a perfectly good cup of coffee was 5 cents.
Right.
And now, as many of you may know, it's the most profitable aisle in U.S. center store grocery.
I didn't know
But
that.
every top to top we did, John. So the gross retail executives with the Keurig executives, every single time they would go, guys, where's the innovation on shelf that will suck consumers off the couch and bring them to my stores? And why does every single K-cup have to be in that rectangular box? And we would song and dance, do a song and dance. The reason is because we were managing hundreds of cents and tenths of cents. And there was no way in God's green earth we were going to change the packaging. So right. Cambio, we've designed this beautiful, compostable, recyclable, drop dead gorgeous packaging to stand out on shelf. Yep. And in the consumer research, it has a 300% shelf take lift versus our brand in the normal rectangle.
Yep.
And importantly, it which is a fancy way of saying it drives preference. Consumers like it better. Yeah. And then inside, we've managed the out-of-box experience. So there are insert cards between the layers with inspirational quotes that our target segment finds inspirational, I guess, ergo inspirational quotes. And we tell stories about the different farmers and our trips around the world and those kind of things. And then to finish, instead of saying we're a triple bottom line company, we say, as you can see there, that we sell eco-friendly, people-powered, profit-sharing coffee pods. Ooh!
Awesome.
And for the consumer, it's the same price as my old K-cups, exact. So it's a better taste, no price sacrifice. And then we're now selectively rolling it out with the first couple of tier 1 U.S. Grocers.
Mm-hmm. So that's phenomenal, Kevin. So as you go through it, you're saying, hey, look, this is a more beautiful thing and really a purpose-driven thing, and also differentiated in its visual. To your point, every K-cup that I have comes in some version of a similar box, right?
Mm-hmm. And because that's all the end-of-line robots know how to do, and there's 362 end-of-line robots in the U.S.
There you go.
And they're not going to change them.
And they're not going to change them. Yes, no, for sure. So, Kevin, what are some of the challenges? I know you and I have talked about them over the years. What are some of the challenges? And if you could center in on one conversation that we've had around how do you, because it goes back to this issue of beauty, how do you create a beautiful buying experience? Because I know that, early on, the buying experience, whether it's on the phone or on the web or, I'm talking about the digital buying experience now, not the in-store.
Mm-hmm.
You seem to find that there are people who have like vertical slices of this, search engine optimization, basket conversion, and so forth, but nobody really going horizontal across the funnel.
Yeah, so fun. So for most of you who took, graduate level marketing and branding courses, this would be stating the obvious out loud, so I apologize. But the idea is to be in the heart and soul of your target customer. And through the lens of empathy, know what would really have their socks go up and down, and then deliver to the best of your ability, deliver every part of your experience um, to that. So if you're a plumbing company in Charleston, South Carolina, when I'm from, and you want to differentiate as the higher service company, why isn't your hold message compelling? Or why didn't you drive hold message time down with one extra staff person? The art of building your, well, actually, this is a fun way to actually maybe articulate it. If you stopped thinking of your business as a business and started thinking of it as your art project, it changes your perspective. What I mean by that, imagine if you really understood your customer and then you unpacked every customer facing aspect of that. So let's say a beauty salon that doesn't sweep the hair up before the next person sits down and they're sweeping up somebody else's hair around you. That's part of the experience. That's part of the product you're selling. Right. If you unpacked every customer facing aspect of your business and thought of it not only as an art project, but you thought of it as, for that component, how could I make it galleryable that would actually hang in MoMA or the Business Experience Hall of Art? It would be galleryable, which is not a word, but it's a fun notion. Yes. And with Cambio, which is basically my personal art project, yes. Like it or love it, that's what happens when you put your art out there. Not everyone loves it, but every aspect of it, every customer-facing aspect of it is as best as we can, A, imagine, and then B, we constantly, trying to improve every aspect of it. My son, who is a trained industrial designer, but is a government, he likes government policy and strategy better, so that's what he's doing. But he said the difference, Dad, between the way a business person thinks about their total product offering and how it presents to the world and a product designer is, for the product designer, every aspect is considered. What's the tension of the knob? Does it click or does it not click? Do you have to push it before it pops out and then turns? Everything is considered. Now, you may not like the answer, but every single thing can answer a why. Why is this piece like that? Why aren't there walls between the stations in the beauty salons? Why aren't there in business? Because most of us have been taught that we aren't an artist since the second grade and got laughed at. We don't like to experience pain, so we stop doing that. And then, you name most of our educations where someone taught that making it more aesthetically appealing is a powerful competitive dimension if you aren't in design school. And right. So what happens is average is everywhere because it's considered. And like, to use the Keurig, it's not considered. Every aspect is not considered, is what I'm trying to say. It's just good enough. And when you put a bunch of good enough things together, it's just not that exciting. It's interesting, John, in my more than a decade of working in research and strategy with the world's top brands, 100% of the time that there was a revenue problem, when you talk to the consumer, it's because they like someone else's stuff better. And in the boardroom, that was never what we talked about. It was capital structure or distribution problems, or it was whatever it was. And smart people like to overcomplicate things. And so thinking of your business as an art project, because all you're trying to do when you're selling something is you're trying to drive preference. And this is a powerful tool across your entire business art project that affects with an A, preference. So thinking of each component of it as galleryable. And you know what? Can I just say this one other thing? Excellence reveals this notion of unpacking everywhere. For example, do you think a Super Bowl winning coach doesn't have the best athletic hasn't unpacked it into the athletic training, quality of athletes, mental conditioning, physical situation that they train in? The way a world-class coach or athlete thinks about winning, because that's all they care about, is they unpack it into all the modules and turn each into its best self. Yes. That's really all I'm saying. turn each into its best self. And when you put that all together, you have a business or a product offering that people can't help themselves preferring.
Yeah, and understanding that aesthetics are a key part of driving preference, and preference drives everything.
Yes.
And it's interesting you say that, and I want to turn to John Bubala's question about supply chain here in a second. But it's interesting. My wife sent me an article recently about Tom Brady's grit, and I think it was in the New York Times. Or anyway, there's a story about, I don't know if you remember, he played with Charles Barkley and a couple other.
I'll be just a sec.
Charles Barkley and a couple other stars in a match play golf game, and so before the golf game came on, Barkley came out and he saw Brady running wind sprints in the parking lot of the golf course, and Barkley said to him, he said, "What are you doing?" And Brady looks up and said, "I'm trying to win a Super Bowl." So John Bubala, who's a very experienced entrepreneur in restaurants and food, said, asked if you experienced any supply disruption in your compostable packaging, and are your containers sourced domestically or from China? And we've got about 3 minutes or so just to keep you mindful of the time.
Yeah, containers are Mexicali, Mexico, and we have not had supply chain problems as of yet.
Excellent. Well, Kevin, in the remaining minute here before I give the benediction, what one thing would you like people working inside organizations or entrepreneurs to think about as they pursue beauty for differentiation?
Brew Cambio early and often. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. What's the second?
So now we'll say the second one. I think it's intoxicating to imagine what the process would be to introduce this powerful weapon into your own organizations, whether you're already running it and get to adjudicate it, or whether you have to go through 3 levels of bosses. And think of it as we said before, chunk it down, give them something that's easy to say yes to, and begin what we call the corridor of success, which is, as you push toward excellence down a hallway, doors are going to open that you never expected, and it's going to be a magical thing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. Hey, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing with us, your insights. And everybody should go out and buy Cambio right away and continue to make this a great success. You'll enjoy the product and the packaging and the mission. So thanks, man. I appreciate you taking the time with us.
Thank you.
So let me just give you folks an idea of 2 things: the rest of the story, and then the end. So, question of where did the K-Cups come from? The legend has it that the folks who founded Keurig were having dinner at a steakhouse up from Massachusetts called Ken's, and they're talking about single serve coffee. And they looked down, and this is Ken's salad dressing, which you can still buy. And they're looking, and they said, well, how about if we put coffee in one of these things? And as they say, that was the beginning of a revolution. So there we go. Let me tell you about 2 things. One is we believe in Creative Commons here at Manifold, so you can take any of this material and reshare it under a Creative Commons license. And if you want to have this message or so forth brought into your organizations or into any kind of discussion group, we'd be happy to host that with you in terms of getting this message out. I want to give you an idea of who's going to be around next month, which is going to be December 17th. Again, a little earlier than the end of the month because of the holidays. It's Jehan Luth. And Jehan is the founder of a company called Banyan that we at Manifold have an investment in. We're very excited about Banyan because he is now collecting a data platform that gives you receipt level data of all kinds of organizations. Right now, he's got about $2 trillion with a T per year of receipts flowing through his platform. And he's going to rapidly get to 4 trillion in terms of, that's out of about a $20 trillion consumer economy. I'm sorry, about a $8 trillion consumer economy. So he'll have about half of it. And it will be the new Nielsen's for every category if he's successful. So he's got a very interesting perspective on where the future of data is going in any kind of consumer or commercial behavior. So I hope you can join us then. And I just wanted to thank our team, the folks who helped me with this, Phyllis Lee, Steve Mathis, and the team at Manifold who helped put this on, and look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you.